So last Christmas, Wonder Woman 1984 was released, and the internet has taken a giant flaming dump on it. And while I do agree with most of the criticisms, it just genuinely shocks me just how many people seem to utterly hate this film. Go into the comment section of any video criticizing this film, and you will see a giant echo chamber of people talking about how bad it is. And frankly, I do not understand that. I posted a review of this movie back when it came out, and I still stand by that it's more good than bad, at least in my opinion. I can totally understand if other people weren't able to look past the sheer amount of plot holes, but I still don't think that worries this much hate. So when this film came out, I actually tried to avoid watching negative reviews because I didn't want to ruin the film for myself. However, sometimes the caveman part of my brain that just loves being angry for some reason just can't help itself, and I end up clicking on a video or a tweet that leads me down a rabbit hole of people crapping on this film. But the thing is, I often agree with a lot of points people make. I just can't wrap my mind around how angry people are getting at it when the biggest flaws are mostly just inconsequential details, in my opinion. Really, the only thing I can understand that people would hate on is the Steve Trevor body swap thing, which does have some really creepy undertones. But the thing is, I think it's been blown way out of proportion. You look at the negative reviews for this film, and this argument is one of the big negatives for a lot of people. But when you look at the reviews of something like Big, which contains creepy undertones that are arguably worse, hardly anyone brings that up. As I said, I actively tried to avoid looking at the negative reviews, but sometimes they're by channels that I just feel compelled to watch every video by, so it's hard to avoid them sometimes. Or other times, something pops up in my recommended, and my curiosity gets the better of me. Case in point, I found this video in my recommended. It's called Why Wonder Woman 1984 is Terrible, and it's by Cynical Reviews. And I feel this video is indicative of the kind of response this movie is getting. In case you don't know, Cynical Reviews is one of those channels that uploads movie and TV reviews on a very inconsistent basis. And I have strongly mixed feelings on him. On one hand, I do agree with most of his takes, and usually he's pretty funny. However, the reason I'm not subscribed to him is because he literally only uploads negative reviews, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it does make his channel feel like a giant cesspool of negativity. However, he just uploaded his first video that I would consider bad about 2 weeks ago as of writing this, and it was his review of Wonder Woman 1984. But why is it so bad? Well, it's really not because of his actual arguments, but mostly because of just how unnecessarily rude he is to the writers, as well as acting like this movie is objectively bad and painting the people who defend it as irrational idiots. And I know that those are some pretty big claims to make, so in order to properly assess this video, I'm gonna start at the beginning.
The hotly anticipated sequel to the 2017 movie Wonder Woman 1984 dropped less like the hottest new mixtape and more like, well, insert poo joke here. The first movie was decent enough, but the sequel is the cinematic equivalent of Afterbirth, and I would argue that it's the worst entry in the DC cinematic universe thus far.
The cinematic equivalent of Afterbirth, you say? The worst DCEU film so far, you say? You're gonna need some hella good evidence to back up a claim like that. Are you really trying to tell me that this is the worst DCEU film? Out of all the crap that they've put out, this is the worst. In my review, I said that it was more good than bad, and although now that I think it's just middling, it's still 10 times better than the original Justice League. Please be good.
And I understand that that's quite a claim given that it's DC we're talking about, but I stand by it. Because as flawed as Suicide Squad, Batman vs. Superman, Justice League, Aquaman,
one does not simply knock Aquaman in front of me. That film was a goddamn masterpiece.
in my opinion, no other DC movie has so little regard for good writing, which for me is all important when judging a movie.
Wait, did he say that's all important to judging a movie, or that's all that's important? Because saying all important doesn't make sense, and saying all that's important suggests that the only thing that you can judge about a movie is the writing, which just straight up isn't true. You can take your pick. Either one is stupid.
In my opinion, no other DC movie has so little regard for good writing, which for me is all important when judging a movie.
Okay, so according to Mr. Cynical here, this film has the least amount of regard for good writing out of any DCEU movie. And this is where we reach the part of the video where he just starts being so unnecessarily harsh on the writers. Believe it or not, he doesn't have hella good evidence to back up this, having already watched the whole video. Yes, he does bring up plenty of plot holes that I would consider legitimate, but there's so much more to good writing than just not having plot holes. Something that I've learned from watching Ryan George's pitch meeting series on Screen Rant is that if you analyze pretty much any movie that has ever been made, you will realize that they all have plot holes, and that is completely fine. The thing about creating movies is that it's really, really hard. The filmmaking process is so chaotic and hectic that it's a miracle that any films are coherent at all. There are so many moving pieces that all want different things that minor flaws are gonna show up, even if the end result is great. If you brush off everything that slipped through the cracks as laziness on the writer's part, then you shouldn't be a goddamn film critic. I'm not saying you can't criticize a film for having plot holes. I've done that plenty of times myself. I'm just saying that pretending that the writers don't care because of them is being overly negative.
I can't even cover every aspect of how awful it is because this review would then be longer than the movie itself. So consider this merely the scummy crust of the turd sandwich.
In the interest of not making this video 5 hours long, I'm not gonna interject at every point in the video that I dislike with my commentary, but instead I'm just gonna cover a few more parts of the video that I find problematic and then call it a day. Anyway, the next portion of the video is just him recapping the film, so I'm gonna skip to the part where he addresses what he calls bad arguments in favor of the film.
You just hate it because you hate women.
No, I don't. I go back to huffing paint. But you know what else doesn't hate women? Raycon. I mean, it's true, isn't it?
Really, dude? Why couldn't you have just made a separate chapter for your stupid sponsor, rather than forcing me to sift through this one to get to your dumb arguments? So, after the sponsorship segment is done, he says this.
First of all, saying that other superhero movies have the same issues doesn't mean that they aren't issues. Also, no, not every superhero movie has these problems, and if they do, they don't have them to this extent. And I maintain that no other superhero movie, not even the other DC movies, comes close to the amount of ridiculous nonsense in Wonder Woman 84. And I don't care that it's a comic book movie, that's not an excuse. Audiences deserve better than this. I shouldn't have to turn off my brain in order to enjoy a movie, but this one clearly wants me to. Because the plot has more holes in it than the poor sod who tipped off the feds about Jeffrey Epstein. And these aren't just nitpicks that can be dismissed out of hand. They're fundamental deficiencies in the manner in which the story progresses. And I've never felt more vindicated in my belief that plot holes are both a real thing and a valid subject of criticism. But hey, who cares about story and characters, right?
Ironic.
Okay, so 2 things here. First off, why couldn't you have responded to any of the rational defenses people have of this movie, rather than exclusively showing tweets by people who are obviously not okay in the head? Actually, I know why. Because it's much easier to pretend that everyone who defends this film is an irrational SJW by only showing tweets by extremists rather than responding to any actual arguments by sane people defending the film. Second, he admits here that the main reason he hates this movie is because of the sheer amount of plot holes. And while I do agree with this take that plot holes are valid criticisms, not all criticisms are created equal. Some warrant hate and some don't. For example, if one movie is criticized for having a formulaic story and another is criticized for being filmed near a concentration camp, then those two complaints would be on very different playing fields. Honestly, after learning that fun fact, I wish I could go back and put Mulan lower than Lion King on my Disney remakes ranking. The thing is, film criticisms exist on a spectrum. Plot holes are on the lowest level of that. I'm not saying you can't criticize or even get upset at movies for having plot holes in them. I'm just saying that they don't warrant the sheer amount of hate that this movie is getting. They don't deserve to be ranked lower than Justice League because of them. Aside from the body swap thing I already addressed, most people's complaints have to do with this movie having a nonsensical plot. And although that is legitimate, as long as people can still follow the story, I don't think it should be at the hate level yet. However, if I really want to accentuate my point, I'm going to take you through the next chapter of the video, which is the weirdest and most hypocritical portion of any video I've seen on this entire goddamn website.
Before we dive into the maelstrom of sewage that is the story, let's talk about the characters. Gal Gadot still cannot act and is responsible for some atrocious line delivery. Of course, this is nothing new.
I did not edit that. Hey Cynic, here's some friendly YouTube advice. If you want to showcase an actor's bad acting, then maybe don't mute the clip of her talking. At first I thought this was just my phone glitching out, but considering that I've watched through this multiple times and it keeps happening, and that this happens again a few minutes later.
After they discover that Max Lord has the wishing rock, they have to go to Egypt to find maybe Steve.
I think this might have been an oopsies on Cynic's part.
She was paid $10 million for this, so you'd think she'd put in more effort. But she presents with all the emotional range of Rey Skywalker.
Actually, that's more of a compliment than anything, because even people who despise Rey have said that Daisy Ridley's acting is really good and one of the best things about the sequel trilogy. And it might have been, considering that Gal Gadot's acting has been cited as one of the best things about this movie. Maybe Cynic muted that clip of her talking on purpose when he realized that she wasn't that bad after all. In my mind, bad acting should really only be considered a major flaw when it takes you out of the movie, but that's down to the individual person, so I can't exactly refute this by saying, you've had these experiences? Well, I've had these experiences. So, what was that noise?
And this time around, Diana is really bad at being a superhero. She repeatedly saves people in ways that could have very easily gotten them or others even more badly hurt. She buys this guy's taxi and then leaves him stranded in the middle of the f***ing desert. And she straight up drops some dudes off a building and onto a police car, which really should have killed them. She does save some Arab kids though, or really fake-looking dolls, which is kinda ironic all things considered. But before this comment section becomes even more cancerous...
Actually, he finally got something right for once. His comment section is cancerous, but not in the way you probably think. Mostly because it's a giant echo chamber of people acting like this movie has no merits whatsoever. I'm not exaggerating. I've spent 5 whole minutes going through the comments, and I haven't found a single positive one that actually says something about, hey, this movie isn't actually that bad. Nope, it's just a giant echo chamber.
Let's move on to Kristen Wiig as Barbara Minerva. She also cannot act. She plays the same character in every movie. And here, she's not comedic enough to be funny, she's not intimidating enough to play the villain, and she's not a good enough actor to play the tragic victim. She tries way too hard to be awkward. In fact, her conversations with Diana are more awkward than that time they tried to inspire poor people by singing Imagine from their multi-million-dollar mansions.
Oh my god, Cynic. Thank you so much for taking time out of this Wonder Woman 1984 review to include a half-minute long clip of that Imagine video. The padding is real, y'all.
While we're talking about Pussy though, Cheetah's character design is lame. She looks like Chester Cheetah's crack whore cousin. You can find more interesting character designs on DeviantArt. Don't try it though, for the love of Christ.
Yeah, I can't complain about this part. In fact, in my own review, I went on a rant about Cheetah's weird and awful design. But somehow, Cynic even managed to screw up this part, the most basic and bottom-of-the-barrel complaint possible, by saying this immediately afterward.
The decision to set their confrontation at night was a terrible one, because you can barely make her out against everything else. It not only ruins her look, but also that of the golden armour that was so hyped up in the marketing. The cynic in me thinks it was done to hide the bad CGI, which is on par with Superman's mouth in Justice League.
Oh god, what's wrong with your face?
I doubt even furries will be able to yiff to this. Not that I would know anything about that, of course. What?
Okay, if you don't like Cheetah's design, then why are you complaining about not being able to see it? I made a joke about this in my review, but I actually think that they set this fight in the dark on purpose to hide the creepy CGI. Also, yeah, I'm sure you would know a lot about furries. Wouldn't you, Cynic? Oh no. I just realized that his avatar looks kind of like my dog, and now I'm upset.
On that note, let's now move on to talk about the story. We've already seen a couple of examples, but the writing really took a nosedive off the cliff. Patty Jenkins herself co-wrote the story and screenplay, her first since 2003's Monster, which was pretty good, so it's not like she can't write. There's being rusty, and then there's just not caring.
I already covered what's wrong with accusing writers of just not caring.
Because the writing in this movie is utterly ridiculous. So much of it comes across as corny, hammy, even downright juvenile, and this is only exacerbated by its execution. It brazenly contradicts facts established in previous DC movies. In both Batman vs Superman and Justice League, Diana insists that she didn't help humanity for 100 years after the events of the 2017 film.
100 years ago, I walked away from mankind. Man made a world where standing together is impossible.
Yet here she is, out in the open, apparently not for the first time. And you can't just say that this isn't a sequel and therefore it's fine to do whatever you want when it clearly is a sequel. You're not fooling anybody. But it isn't just about the inconsistencies in the lore. This lack of concern manifests itself in the myriad of writing issues present in this script. Some of this writing simply doesn't work because it shouldn't or doesn't convey its intended meaning. Such as when Diana gets wounded at one point, which is supposed to show that she's losing her powers. But she's never been established to be bulletproof, so it's like, okay, I guess that's bad?
You literally say that as a clip of her taking a line of bullets plays. What the actual hell is wrong with this video? Before someone says that she blocked all those bullets with her bracelet thingy, there is no way in hell that all of that gunfire was concentrated on her wrist.
The story also heavily relies on some of the most egregious Deus Ex Machina solutions I've ever seen in a mainstream film. They have a problem? Well, here's a solution that comes completely out of nowhere and is never used again. Perfect, 10 out of 10 IGN. Her lasso of truth can now do literally anything she needs it to. She doesn't have her shield this time for some reason, but she can spin it fast enough to stop bullets and then never does it again.
Alright, but why on earth would she use this ability again? She's never in another fight where bullets are used at any point after this. So why on earth would she use it again?
She can lasso a bullet out of the air and then never does it again. She can reach an airplane from near the ground because...
When the movie makes a mistake, that's a massive problem that must be addressed. It means the writers are lazy idiots who just don't care. When you make a mistake, you get to add text to the bottom of the screen that tells everyone that you made a mistake, except with "but still" tacked at the end, and that is A-okay. But seriously, this video has so many mistakes in it, from small inaccuracies that I probably wouldn't have noticed if he didn't mention it in text at the bottom of the screen, to big things like forgetting to unmute your footage when you're ranting about bad line delivery. Everything has flaws, including your own damn videos. There is no point in getting so worked up over the ones in a movie. There's nothing wrong with not liking plot holes, but there is something wrong with claiming that the people behind it just don't care and then go on to riddle your own video with so many flaws to the point that I'm convinced this might be a satire. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to talk about. There's plenty more stuff that he completely misses the point of, like when he complains about how this movie tackles feminism, but I don't want to cover that kind of stuff because talking about feminism on the internet is like walking through a field of landmines where they manage to shove a mine under every square inch of the field. No matter what you say, you're gonna piss someone off. No matter where you step, you're gonna get blown up. If you want a summary of the rest of the video, thankfully, Cynic himself actually provided one.
Look, I've rambled on for long enough, but you get the idea.
My video.
Is terrible and a perfect exercise in how not to write a
video.
The more you try to unpack it, the worse it gets. I could have gone into so much more detail, but I just didn't have the patience.
But after all of that in the 20 minutes I've spent recording this, I am completely drained of energy by this point, and I just really want to stop talking. If you love this video or hated it, do whatever the hell you want. Comment something, like it or dislike it. I really don't care. I just want to leave at this point. Bye.